So the next speaker is Marthe Elise Stramrud, and it's the last speaker of today's seminar, and we're very happy to have you. And Marthe holds a MFA from Oslo National Academy of the Arts from 2018. Prior to this, she studied at Bergen School of Architecture in 2012-2013, and she graduated with a BFA from the Department of Photography in Bergen, National Academy of the Arts in 2011, and studied photography at the University of Gothenburg in 2009 to 2010. She has participated in a number of group exhibitions, among others the MFA degree show at Kunstnerhus last year, Wildlife Sculpture Park in Nesoddparken 2017. Then one thing led to another at Fotogalleriet Oslo. 2017, Fading Forms at Etre in Bergen 2016. Not going to read the entire list, you can go online and read it if you want, but I just wanted to point out that you have exhibited quite a lot, and also, which was mentioned here, is that you have exhibited photography as well as other stuff, and and that's what's I hope we will learn a lot about today. And I'm just gonna say that you also play a significant role at a Young Artist Society, and where you work to improve the financial conditions of artists in Norway, which are also important. So welcome.
Okay. Skal vi se. Jeg har notater på I have my notes on this. Ja. Takk, André. This feels very near. Sånn. Hører dere meg? Ja. Thank you to all the speakers today. It's very, insightful talks, which also left me a little bit nervous. But I just have to remind myself, I was thinking just now, and you guys, that I'm here in the position as an artist that knows my own practice, and I'm not an expert on this stuff. So I'm also a babbler, so that's why I have a manuscript. I'll try to keep focused. 3 years ago, I made what someone might call a shift in my practice, and I guess that's the part of the reason why I'm invited here today. Because my background comes from architecture as well as fine art, but with a special focus on photography. And for a long time, I have been interested in the discussion about the relationship between sculpture, object, and photography, and how the boundaries between these can be opened up. I also sent André a lot of images, so I think it's nearly 150 of those. So I'll just let them flow, maybe, in the background here, and then hopefully there will be some sense of what I'm talking about. It starts with some of my photographic work, and then it goes on to the clay works that I'm doing mostly now these days. So I have used photographs, and now I also use clay as a vehicle for studying the flow between silhouettes, between backdrops, flatness and form, between 2 and 3 dimensions, and between photographs, objects, and the places that they occupy in the public and private realm. I'm quite fascinated with how some works of art have the possibility of vibrating energy once they have been transported from the artist studio to their eventual home. And these energies are only felt on what can be considered some sort of a spiritual level. So, this can be a little bit jazzy, so just try to follow me. So with this talk today, I intend to guide you through some of my ideas and thoughts orbiting around the central question: can handmade objects radiate joy? So, handmade, object, radiation, utstråling på norsk, joy. Or can a sculpture be brought to life? The idea is that even if these are inanimate objects, I believe that they still inhabit some sort of antennas that give them the ability to animate or to bring life to their surroundings. It goes a little bit fast, this stream, so maybe Even though it's a lot of them, I might just stop it a little bit. After spending several years working sculpturally with photography, as I mentioned, I was searching for new techniques and materials to broaden my artistic repertoire, so to speak, which is what led me to start my master's at the Art Academy at Kio in 2016. At that point, photography was more or less the only technique that I had learned to work with, and even though I felt sort of technically confident, I found myself left with little or no surprises during my work process. So I was eager to shake things up. As soon as the school year started at Kio, I quickly visited the various workshops on offer to see what they do and to learn. So I stopped by the wood workshop. I remember I did a course in metal. I got a thorough introduction of various ways of casting. I visited the textile department and did a workshop on digital embroidery, as well as I learned about 3D printing and CNC machines and all of these digital things. Needless to say, the resources at Kio are endless. And as an artist, having this break from doing a bachelor into a master's, having a few years sort of working on the outside where I had to pay for every little move that I did, this was some sort of dream coming true. So at the same time that I was running around trying to learn it all, without having any clear plan of where to lead my hunger, so to speak, I was welcomed into a year-long introductory course at the ceramic department, which was very wonderful. Thank you, ceramic department. I saw some of you here. And it is safe to say that that's the moment that I fell in love with clay, as cheesy as that might sound. My original plan was, at that time, to keep on working with my camera, but perhaps evolve my project by building my own photographs instead of using the found or bought objects that I had previously been working with. But then, learning that clay is really just fine-grained rock or earth material that's blended with water and can be formed into any number of shapes, I found quite extraordinary. To get that little soft lump of clay in my hands and knowing that everything is possible, that this dust can kind of reach its destiny of becoming a coffee cup or a large-sized sculpture. Ceramics presented me with an excellent material to continue my exploration of form, of perception, and fantasy. So I quickly got caught in a sudden obsession of researching hands-on different aspects of sculpture and ceramic, and I forgot about my camera for a little bit. I was trying to understand what is happening, both in the technical part of things, but especially in the sense of perception and our bodies. And I guess that's why I'm talking here now. Because my practice derives from a strong sense of personal inquiry into ascribed values of objecthood, particularly in relation to notions of spirituality and perception. I am happy to use the word spirituality. The architect and theorist Juhani Pallasmaa, whom I love, once said that the sensibility of the eye and the skin, as well as our heart, makes us humans experience non-human forms as having some sort of soul. I found that very beautiful. Because the process of making things in clay forces our minds to slow down to the speed of our hands, and also other much slower forces like drying and firing and these things. I believe that these handmade objects leaves us with this magical ability to radiate this perhaps silly chosen word, joy. So what you can see from my images here is that I have allowed myself to sort of riff around with flatness and form, with volume, surface and color, with decor and function, as well as malfunction. And for a long time I was afraid of making cheerful, or call it decorative, work, but that has changed. And why in the world am I doing this? Making decorative works in 2019. Kind of yikes. The great Betty Woodman once said that these days we see a lot of art around that intend on making us feel bad, probably aiming to raise our consciousness towards all the evil that goes around in the world, and in the hope that we will do something about it. And as Woodman was saying, so am I. This is not what I'm doing. But it doesn't mean that my work is a rejection of all the evil in the world. And it's certainly not a rejection of the political, or that artists don't have the power to influence social change, because of course we do. I rather think that my contribution to make the world a better place comes through evoking feelings of pleasure and joy. And this is a way to point towards some sort of hope. Yeah, I giggle a little bit when I say this hope and joy and these things, because it sounds a bit strange to hear myself talking about this. But what can I say? It's not silly. I think we need to talk more about these things because it's dead serious. But let's try, for example, joy. It's a silly word. I heard the other day on a podcast that someone was stressing that joy is not the same as happiness. And I thought that, oh, that's something that I should mention on Fridays, just so you know. Because joy is some sort of what is laying underneath it all. And it's not, I'm not talking about some sort of recipe for happiness. Yeah, so I can relate to this person on the podcast when she says that she thinks of joy and of people practicing joy as some sort of act of resistance. It's resistance against the state of this world. It's resistance against our collective trauma. It's resistance against personal trauma. It's resistance against living as a woman in a male-dominated art world. And it's also, not to forget, it's resistance against living as a woman and making decorative and often functional art pieces. Yeah, so I see that handmade and often functional objects have this special gesture of something sincere or sincerity. And I feel a strong connection to that, to be some sort of an instinctive artist. And my hope is that if people spend time with my work, they might get a sense of what I have been thinking about. Because instead of choosing some conceptual approach to clay, I have come to embrace ceramic and clay's strong connection to craft. To be, let's see where I am. I guess we could say, I'd said that already, that I'm dealing with both function and malfunction. Because some of them are much more sculptural. These ones that you see here are clearly functional, but also sculptural. Some of them are humorous and perhaps bizarre in a way, with those big handles or oversized bodies. But I want to say that it's not to make fun of function, because I also want to be serious about making these pure functional things, like vases and plates and cups and bowls and spoons, etc. Things that actual people can bring to their homes and touch and carry around and use to cradle fruit or to hold flowers. And as an extension of that, I also want to say that I absolutely think or love to treat the smaller pieces, the more functional wares, with the same sincerity, or maybe call it seriousness, as the more sculptural, bigger pieces, because I see no hierarchy. So let's talk about decor or glaze, because that's a big part of it. Working with clay often comes with the job of also putting a paintbrush in your hands and add that final thing, the glaze. At first I was terrified, because one of the first things that I started to make was these flat silhouette vase forms. And when they were bisque fired, they kind of looked like white canvases to me. And I was not so trained in either painting, color theory, drawing technique. I had been very focused on camera photography based education. But then I just allowed myself to jump into it and just do it all. So I paint, I carve, I dip, I drip, I whip, I sgraffito, I mix my own glazes, but I also use commercial glazes and underglazes, and I use raw materials such as oxides and carbonates. I silk screen both directly onto wet clay, but I also silk screen on silk paper, and I transfer it on. And I often do all of these things on the same piece. And if you think about the nature of it and how the glaze is sort of, at least for those of you who know a little bit how to work with ceramic, glaze is kind of like, if you glaze, if you have a bisque fired piece in your hand and you put the glaze on, it's kind of like into the fired body. So I like to say that glazing feels kind of like painting, like there is no way back, you know? And I find that kind of relieving. And then the shapes and these forms and this very naive, often crooked shape of my work are partly excused in little experience. But mostly it's an intended language that I hope that I, even after my hands get more experience, I hope that I can manage to stay with this language. Because I think that form is crucial for better broadcasting of this joy that I'm speaking about. For example, with these flat pieces or these flat vases, sort of. It's supposed to depict this classical vase form, but then I have folded that form out. And while doing that, I'm making the pieces sort of like paintings that radiate this energy so that their flatness and their surface area is sort of bigger and more in your face. And thus it's providing the viewer with sort of larger antennas of all that joy that I mentioned. Okay, this is very jazzy, but I believe in this. And this also goes a little bit for my two flower vases, these shapes that you saw earlier, because especially when you put flowers into them, they're like really true antennas of this, I don't know what it is, but this thing that these handmade craft objects have with them that you can hopefully get transmitted onto you. And another reason why I think they're able to radiate better than a traditional painting hanging on the wall, and I'm sorry if there are any painters here now, don't get offended, because I think that at the same time you could consider this a painting. Maybe this is not the best example because this is one of those bigger ones that it's actually not so useful, but let's say this one. Because at the same time as you can consider it a painting with two sides, it also has a function where you can put your bouquet of red tulips in it, or these pink flowers. Something for the hands to touch and to move around, to carry to the sink, to put water in, and then to take it back. And I think there's something special laying there. Let's see. So, the evolution, as you can see, we actually got around to all of the images. I'll just keep running it, and I thought it was going to go on forever. Anyways, the evolution, as you can see, of my process enters around accentuating emotions that comes when we choose to slow fabrication down and allow for our minds to drift. And as artists, I think this is a form of spirituality without DT. To appreciate the small victories of a perfectly baked glaze. Let's go to these things. Let's see. Yeah, for example. To appreciate the small victories of a perfectly baked glaze is also an act of patience and of letting go. And with all of the works that I have made up until now and continue to make, I want to seriously bring forth joy, or something like it. I want to spark human feelings of curiosity through these animated interplays. And I hope, the hope is that the viewer will relate to the feelings that I have sort of tried to enclose inside the works. And if any other or broader goal is reached by this practice, it is that I seek to work towards some sort of practice of appreciation that eventually might help diminish just some weight of the world. It might seem like an impossible task, but I see my works as something of a love letter, I like to say, or that they have these vibrations that they release that may help unburden our hearts in small but significant ways. And it's like a little smile on your face when you see that stupid cheeky sculpture that you could also serve pasta from, you know? And I think that if I keep chipping away at this, it's a contribution as a defense of intuition, of sensuality, of slow process. And I am becoming curious to find ways of nurturing the side of us that yearns for more delicate tokens of human empathy. Sounds very big. My pursuit is to make a space where non-verbal reactions can come forth, such as joy or melancholy or humor, if it's only a little flicker. Tack. And if you have any questions, I'm here.
Any questions?
Thank you for this very joyful lecture. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit. You mentioned a little bit about your encounter with ceramics as kind of being home, or like that's my material. But because you spoke so much about joy, do you think your joyness is dependent on the ceramic material? Or was it in your photography?
I think...
Is it part of you, this joy, or is it coming from the material?
Yeah, I think maybe this is something that I've gotten a better language for after I started working with clay, and something that I had struggled with a little bit in my photographs. This way of sort of being so persistent, of working with, you can call it beauty, or you can call it composition, or like, you know, sculptural compositions through photography. And the first time that even though I kind of have done it all the time, if we go back to those, I've always had a little bit of a problem, or like a little bit of a bad guilt or something, to make these like funny photographs. But then these ones that you see here, they are a part of a commission that I did for a hospital, Sunna sykehus, for those who knows, who is a hospital for long-term illness, if you have been into some sort of a heavy trauma. And then my job was to put one photograph into each of the patient's rooms. So 52 rooms altogether. Seemed like a little bit of an impossible task, so we decided to have 2 and 2 photos together so that we can have 26, but it's still a lot of them. But my point is that that's maybe the first time that I actually sat down and thought about why do they want these photos? You know, for the first, what can they do in this room, in this setting? And then I just realized that this is when I can actually allow myself to just dive into and doing something pleasant, or doing something that maybe put a little bit of a smile on your face, or, you know, it's not like classically beautiful, because this is a very dirty water bottle, but with the light that I chose and the composition, I'm aiming for some sort of relief. And I think I'm not answering your question, I'm thinking out loud, but I think that when I first started working with clay and got those vitrified sintra, is that high-fired glazed objects in my hands, realizing that I can put my lips into it, I can touch it as much as I want to, I can put it into the dishwasher, I can hose it down, I can put it out in the forest and leave it there for 3 years, which is the ones that you saw in outdoor photos. And there was something, there's something very special about that just puts me at least much nearer to art, or the art that I make, instead of something that you should just look upon as some sort of desire object. I don't know if that answered your question.
Any more questions for Marthe Elise?
You can also just ask me afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, Marthe Elise, and thank you all. for coming today.